Welcome to the Four Pillar Podcast. We stand for faith, family, fitness, and finance. And today we are talking about judgment. Once upon a time, Matt.
Yes.
Once upon a time, I was going through, it was like right after I graduated college. I had an opportunity I had this gentleman come approach me, and he was talking to me about being a part of his business. He was kind of I don't want to get into too many details of it, but it was like a marketing business or different business to like deal with marketing to just other businesses and stuff like that. And he essentially asked if I wanted to be or work with this guy or be a part of his business, and I had to go through and make a judgment if I wanted to work with this gentleman or not. And essentially, I did end up working with the gentleman. It didn't actually end up working out. But when I went through this, I had to, I had this person come and I had to assess, based on essentially, what the business was. But one thing I've learned as well, too, which I think is important, is I had to, whether if I wanted to say I was or not, I had to judge, like, okay, how's this person act? How are they handling finances? What's their personal life look like? And what is like all this stuff put together that this person represents this essential business or something that they want me to work with them? Can I work with this person? Long story short, I did work with the person, and it did not work out very well. And I essentially maybe did not make a good judgment call on that. But anyway, that was my story. It wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, but
it's a good lead in.
That's a good lead in. So, but anyway, today we're talking about judgment and, what is judgment? Should you judge people and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I think whether we realize it or not, we're making judgments and being judged almost every moment of every day. And I think there's a difference between those kind of judgments and, like what we're going to get into a little bit later. God commands us not to judge,
right?
And what those differences are.
And it depends what you're talking about too. When you hear the word judgment, right? It could be you're judging somebody, but I want to read the definition. This off the Oxford Dictionary. The first, there's multiple definitions because the human language is very complex. But the ability to make and consider decisions or come to a sensible conclusion. So essentially judging, or when you say judgment, right, or you're judging something or somebody, maybe not a person, but essentially everybody's judging or using judgment. Because you're coming to a conclusion, a sensible conclusion about something. And I think that can be applicable to people as well. You can come to a sensible conclusion about somebody. And I think my personal opinion, like the Bible's trying to tell us that, we shouldn't per se judge people, but we can come to a sensible conclusion to somebody, but then not use that judgment to say put someone in a bad demeanor or a bad light or something like that.
Right. And if a business is hiring, and let's say they get 5 people that apply, you're not just throwing 5 names in a hat and drawing one out and say, okay, this person got the job, right? You're looking at their applications, their resume, maybe you call past employers, references, and you're making a judgment who the best possible candidate is, right?
Well, I don't know. Now these days, right, if you have 5, which if you have 5 people apply for a job, right, one person's white, one person's, Latino, one person has short hair, one person's a woman, one person's a unbinary unicorn or whatever, or whatever. Essentially, all these things are basically if you don't hire this person or you don't hire this person, you're is prejudice the right? Prejudice probably isn't the right word for that. So that means prejudging, right?
Yeah, that could be the
right. But essentially, it turns into
it's not
a thing where it's like, well, you might as well. Anyway,
you might as well pick them out of a hat.
You might as well, because you're gonna get in trouble for not hiring somebody, essentially, because everything's so crazy right now.
The way it's supposed to be,
right,
is that the best person gets the job, but that best person is a judgment that you're making.
Well, correct, yeah.
Right, unless you're just saying, okay, here's a test, you guys are all taking it, high score wins. A judgment's kind of like an opinion.
Absolutely.
right? And you have to, in your opinion, who's going to be the best person for this position,
Right.
right? We see people walk in and out of here all day, and I think without even thinking about it, judgments are happening.
Mm-hmm.
All right. On a bigger scale, one thing that I hear a lot, and I just had someone tell me recently, I'm not going to go to the gym because all I'm going to do is get judged there.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't ask what she thought she was going to be judged on. It's safe to assume that, and I think she would admit this, she's talking about her weight.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. The way she, or even just the way they look according to their weight, or
maybe
whatever.
Something I do hear sometimes. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'll look stupid.
Right. That's I think a very good one too.
Okay. If someone walks in and you make a judgment on them, what does that look like?
You're saying if I judge somebody?
Yeah.
I'm making a, well, right? Wouldn't it be prejudice? Am I using prejudice correctly?
Yes, you are. But physically, what does that look like?
If I'm judging somebody that's overweight,
yeah.
Or, well, for me, which I think it's hard, right? Because I essentially believe that we shouldn't really. I think there's proper times to prejudge people, and proper times not to. And I think regardless, you can give everybody, an equal right, deserving way to treat them, unless they prove different to you or they're a jerk. But I'm getting to your answer.
I don't mean you personally. I just mean gotcha. A person. My point is, it's not like someone walks in the door and people point their fingers and laugh and start making fun of them.
Well, right. I see what you're saying.
They're just thoughts that somebody have in their head.
Right.
Now, if somebody says to me,
and honestly too, I think the way I've always thought about it is like, right, if someone's really overweight comes in, and right, you might essentially be like, and these are thoughts, I'm not like, I don't tell anybody this or anything, but essentially like, okay, this person is really overweight, they're fat, or they're a little big, I almost feel bad for them because obviously they're unhealthy. But essentially then too, you're like, this is really odd. Like this, I'm pertaining all my thoughts that run through my head when I see somebody. This is really awesome, and they're super brave for coming in because they know this is what they need to do, is they need to exercise.
Well, and what else do we say when somebody says, "I don't want to get judged. I'm afraid of getting judged"? We say, and I believe for the most part it's true, right? You hear people say, well, everyone's just worried about themselves. They're not even paying attention to you. Most people are going to be supportive, et cetera. And I think that's true.
Absolutely.
But I cannot speak for every single person in this gym. My point is, if there is a couple people in a gym who judge you, they're just thoughts in somebody's head.
Right.
And that is stopping you from coming in and doing what you want to do, need to do, because they think something in their brain.
Right. And that's even something too. That's actually a really good point, because I never thought about it like that. Right. It's a big difference versus thoughts in someone's head versus like a verbal acknowledgement of those thoughts to somebody. Right?
And at the same, okay, you're not going to come into the gym because you feel like you're going to be judged. What are you when you go to the grocery store, to a restaurant, to your place of work, shopping at the mall? I mean, you're getting judged. I get judged everywhere I go, not for the same reason that person is, but for a lot of other reasons. And if you don't ever want to get judged, then you can't ever leave your house.
Right.
Yeah. And I think part of it is that there's more going on in this person's head than probably anybody else's.
Right.
But you don't even know what people are thinking. And it's safe to assume.
Well, a lot of times people aren't thinking what you're probably thinking they're thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they might be. There are people that are so into what they're doing that they're not even paying attention to you.
Right.
And there are people who probably, I mean, I don't want to say they don't care, but they're just, it's not like they see you and their whole world comes to a stop and they're like, oh, I got to sit around and judge this person for a while. I mean, yes, they're probably going to have a thought if they, but like I said, people. are more likely to be supportive,
Right.
to,
Well,
like you said, think it's brave that they're in here doing something about it. But there probably are people who are like, that person, blah, blah, blah. What I don't like is the idea of being like, well, okay, I'm just not going to do anything because this person might think badly of me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to bring this up too, because obviously there's a Planet Fitness coming in town. So that's where, like, right, you're talking about judgment and like, oh, go to a place that's a no judgment zone. I consider our gym a no, essentially. Well, okay, I mean, essentially, we don't, no judgment zone. We're family oriented gym. But this is the thing too. I think that's impossible as well too, to have a no judgment zone, like what you're saying. And by saying, like, if you're going to go to a Planet Fitness or just any gym or anywhere, right, and it's like a quotations no judgment zone. I'm just using Planet Fitness for an example. Nothing bad. Again, I don't personally care for Planet Fitness or whatever, but each of their own. But by saying the Planet Fitness is a no judgment zone, they're automatically judging everybody.
Explain that.
Well, right. If it's a no judgment zone, like you're going into there, like somebody's going into a Planet Fitness, and how can it be a no judgment? You have to judge somebody, right? So who are you saying, like, if this is a no judgment zone, like what I don't like, it's, I guess, hard for me to explain.
Well, they're saying they speak for everybody else in that building.
Right, correct.
Now, unless they're saying from us, you're not going to get any judgment from us.
Right.
What does that look like? Verbally?
Right, exactly. And then that too, and I'm using Planet Fitness. I think it's a good example because, like, what are the things they're known about, right? They have like the thing where you can't lift heavy weights.
The lunk alarm.
The lunk alarm. I had a friend go there that, like, they have a dress code. You can't wear cutoffs. So what is that?
Oh, you're judging guys that wear tank tops and lift heavy weights, and
you're judging. That's
a good point.
You are judging. You're judging everybody. You're essentially judging people that.
And when you don't like something, you press this button, and this big alarm goes off to let everyone know that you've done something to cross their boundaries or whatever.
Yeah. So essentially, I think it's impossible to have a no judgment zone because you're ultimately judging everybody by saying this is a no judgment zone. And once again, then you have to go, and like you said, you have to define what does that look like, and what does the business stand for? Because I mean, essentially, too, like, even if we say, whatever, if we say this is a no judgment zone, I guess, or whatever, which I'm saying for the most part, everybody is very friendly, family friendly, but excuse me, but we essentially have to judge somebody if it's a no judgment zone.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening all the time. You might be walking around here and you see me do something in class, and you're like, oh, I don't like Matt doing that. I don't like the way Andy talked to that customer.
Right.
Or the opposite. I do like that. They're judgments.
Right. Or coming to a sensible conclusion about something.
Yeah.
And I think as well, too, where I think people get like too butthurt about it or whatever as well. Like for example, this is a good example. I think you have cauliflower ear, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like, if you're walking through once again, you're walking through a store, like, whatever, and someone looks at your ears, you have cauliflower ear, they're going to come to a sensible conclusion that you probably wrestled.
Mm-hmm. I get asked all the time.
Yeah. Is there anything wrong with that?
Nope.
Yeah, it's a sensible conclusion of judging. But essentially what you're saying is, if someone says, well, you should never judge anybody or not do anything, then that they're technically wrong and a horrible person for judging you. That I mean, this is an extreme example, right, but I'm using it as that's essentially when you judge somebody, or you're making a judgment call on somebody, it's coming to a sensible conclusion. It doesn't mean it has to be evil or sinful or put in a bad place.
Well, I mean, Lisa and I meet at North Main for lunch once in a while, and I'll be driving down Main Street and I'll think about it. I'm in these ratty sweatpants and a sweatshirt, and I look like a homeless bum, and I'll be compared to the way people are usually dressed in there, think I get judged? Probably.
Sure, yeah.
Is it going to stop me from going to lunch with my wife?
Right.
Now these are all right. There's a a scale.
Right. And
Right.
I think too, you have to be conscious of not, depending on where you're at or what you're doing, is not using that to essentially judge someone's personality or being of them. Right.
Well, I think that's the difference between, when God says, thou shalt not judge, right? It's kind of different than what we've been talking about for the first 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That's when you're judging someone to be what? A good person, a bad person.
Or even like what you said, rich or poor, and not even rich or poor, but not having money, having money to pay for your essential needs or not. I mean, you shouldn't always judge people that either.
So where do you think that line is? Like Eden's going to be in school soon, right? And at a certain point, she'll observe, all the kids around her, and this group of kids maybe gets in trouble a lot, and they're smoking in the bathroom, and these kids just,
I think it has to come down to your moral and your code of conduct for your life, and that's how you make a decision on what the kind of people you put yourself around, or if you use that for a judgment. Like, I guess when I talk to somebody, they may have done something bad or whatever, and they're like, I'm working with a gentleman now that did something really bad in his life, and he's got in trouble for it. I'm not saying as far as he's going through the process of essentially repenting for that, trying to do somewhat right, trying to do right and stuff like that. And I'm working with him doing some training and stuff, and essentially he's like, like a lot of people like wouldn't even like want to talk to me or hang around me or whatever, and I'm like, just because you did XYZ or something doesn't mean I judge and just say you're a horrible person or a horrible human being. I essentially try to treat everybody the exact same until they give me a reason not to do that. And I think when we're using a judgment call, that's, like I said, it's based off our moral code of conduct of what we want to run our lives by. So yeah, essentially, we're going to have to judge people. And like, obviously, this person could have came in and did XYZ, or this person could come in looking like, like you said, like a bum, or, maybe like a really bad person, or essentially, I think we have to be aware of that. But I think essentially, unless that person, does something that
to us personally,
that does something that flag, or not even to us personally, but just to somebody else in general, or acts a certain way, for example, smoking in the bathroom, it raises that flag up, and that's where essentially you have to be like using your judgment to say this person potentially is not a good person, or I can't put myself around this person and insert circumstance.
That's an example. Like, going back to that real quick, Eden has to she's going to choose which group of kids she hangs out with, the good kids, whatever, the bad kids. And that's good for her. Right. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, she could say, I don't want to be around that kind of behavior. Right. Now, I'm not saying those kids are bad people or bad kids, but I'm going to choose, I know kids don't really look at two groups of people.
Right.
It's just an example.
No, it's a very good example. I know where you're going with it.
I'm going to go in that direction. But I think there's a difference between making judgments about our life and who we want to be and what we want to do, and then looking at other people who don't do that and saying they're wrong and they're bad and they're...
and essentially, I think God tells us to do that in the Bible as well too. That's where I got that from. My whole thing of how I look at people, and I look at it a little bit differently as well too. Where essentially, like, I think a police officer should judge every single person he comes in contact with when he's on his job.
Profiling,
correct? 100%. Yeah, 100%. It's completely necessary. His life is at stake. He's took up an oath to protect the community, protect himself and other people, and he has to do his best job to fulfill that. But it's, I mean, I don't want to get off topic here. But the the Bible, I think it tells us, I mean, right, it tells us about the plank in your eye. I think it's in Matthew. He talks about, remove the plank.
The speck of dust versus the plank.
Yeah, versus the plank. And he tells, remove the plank from your own eye before you take the speck of dust from, someone else's. And essentially, I think the Bible's telling us, like, we can, essentially, right, it tells us the way to deal with judging someone else, right? But essentially, too, by doing that, it's dealing with yourself or judging yourself or your what I call, I guess, the code of conduct for your life or your moral compass or whatever the rules you stand by. You should have those things set and those things fixed. And essentially that should stop you from making bad decisions or dealing with other bad people, essentially. But then also there's an appropriate, action to take to where, if you are judging, you're dealing with somebody else, right? An appropriate way to do that. And I had some scriptures up here. I know I'm just paraphrasing stuff out of the Bible that I've read at some point. But essentially, dealing with the sin or whatever or badness out of somebody else, there's an appropriate measure of actions. Like it tells us, I can't remember which scripture it is. I was trying to look here and find it, but essentially, right, remove the plank out of your eye before you get somebody else's, and it says, hey, if you tell this person about this problem or something, tell them first and then check on them again. And if they're still doing it, go to the elders of the church and talk to the elders of the church to say, hey, this person is having troubles with this. They're not fixing it. Then essentially, once you get to that point, it's like at some point, right, it's a disfellowship thing. If this person isn't going to be acknowledged or change their ways, if you do say something, if the church says something, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, essentially, God is telling us to judge people, and this word can be thrown around or hard to define as righteous, right? Which everybody's going to argue, especially somebody that isn't a Christian is going to argue, well, what's righteous? Is it based off the Bible? Is it based off the law of the land? Right? I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but I think we're told to ultimately judge in a correct way or a righteous way, and essentially that could be not being prejudiced against somebody that looks a certain way or does something or whatever, unless they give you a reason to do that. But also there's scenarios as far as not getting taken advantage of, self-defense and awareness that go into that as well. Because essentially, if I'm walking around by myself, it's going to be different than if Kylie's walking around with our daughter, right?
Well, that whole thing of crossing the street, if you see a group of, 5 or 6, 17-year-olds at night, do you cross the street or you keep walking and pass them? You got your daughter with you, all that. I mean, that's a judgment.
Right.
And it could be a judgment, like you said earlier. It doesn't even have to be the police. It could just be civilian, and you might be wrong. Maybe those kids weren't going to do anything.
Right.
But better safe than sorry, right? When you get into what you were talking about,
yeah,
I feel like, you're gonna say something to someone else about something they're doing or the way they're living their life.
God can judge me, is what they're going to say, right?
Right.
And they're not wrong.
Or two, who are you to judge me?
Right.
You must be perfect to be making that judgment on me. I have a hard time with that. I mean,
I think that's a really sticky thing. And essentially, I mean, that's one of the scriptures that says, right, the reason they say to pull the plank out of your own eye before dealing with another person is essentially you can't be a hypocrite, right?
Right.
So it'd be like right. It'd be like you. I mean, you've been sober for how long? You've been sober for now?
It'd be 14 years in July.
Yeah, 14 years. So essentially, it would be like you saying, let's say you're still drinking, right? Or you're like kind of sober, off and on, kind of thing.
And I'm going to give someone a hard time about there.
Correct. Yeah.
But even if it's not the same, sin, let's say,
right.
I want to correct so-and-so over there on their sin, but they might be different, but I got my own sins. I feel like I shouldn't be correcting him. And I mean, is that what you're saying too?
I think essentially, which we're not perfect, it's possible.
And we're never going to be.
Yeah. But essentially, yeah, you're keeping yourself in check before you help your brother. You put judgment on your brother for something.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, we're never going to be free of a sin completely. Right. But you're saying, I don't know, you've done some kind of inventory or audit of yourself or whatever. And
yeah, you're dealing with it, or you're trying to do better. But if you essentially are living a double standard life, and like you said, you're you're still drinking off and on. I don't know, you beat your wife, or that's okay. That was an extreme, but like you're being a bad person,
and I'm walking around all righteous, telling other
right?
people,
Yeah, like no, yeah, you got to deal with stuff out of your own before you should be pushing yourself on other people, saying, hey, you're not doing this right or whatever. But I think it is hard. It's a fine line. Right. Essentially, I have to do that in the business, right? If like it's impossible for a business to run 100%, accuracy, because humans have errors. But essentially, at the end of the day, right, it's my job as, like, I guess quotations, the boss or whatever. Right, we have processes that are trying to handle stuff correctly. So if someone's not doing something or doing the best about it, I essentially have to look at that. I have to judge it. Is it okay for this person to do this? If not, I have to give feedback on it. And essentially, what I'm trying to do is something that I've always lacked in when business has gotten a lot better, is organization with certain things, right? And obviously, right, if I'm super unorganized, which I've tried to fix in my life, I have a schedule, I journal, I have a project tracking. Like I've amped up, right, my thing. Like I'm trying to take accountability for myself to be as organized as possible. So essentially, with me doing that now, right, now I have to judge other people and say, hey, you need to do X, Y, Z, or may I give you feedback on this, and this is why we do this.
Well, for sure, you wouldn't be able to say anything. Let's say you were always late.
Right.
Well, then you have no, even if you're the boss, going around saying, oh, Christine, you've been late, and Joel, you've been late. Well, look who's
right.
You're supposed to be the one that's setting the example for everything. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I see what you're saying. That's, you have to.
And one of those things too is, like, right, essentially, if I come give you feedback on something, the things I just told you, you're never going to know, essentially, if I'm doing those, right? Like if I do my calendar, I have a project, like I do all this stuff to try to keep myself organized. Like I'm doing it, and you may notice maybe I operate more cleaner, or I get more stuff done, whatever. But essentially, I'm doing those things, and you don't even know that I'm doing them. But for me, it's like, well, once again, it's kind of like my moral code of conduct. Like the whole thing is like I'm putting myself where I should be as a leader, and then I'm addressing other people.
Clean up your own mess before you.
Right. Yeah.
Let's go back. That client you were talking about. What do you think about judging people's past?
Yeah,
I have a lot of things in my past that I'm not proud of, that I have a lot of shame about. And my personal feeling is that, to a certain degree, I mean, if people judge me on that, are they wrong? I don't.
No,
I mean, I have to move on. I have to be a better person. I have to continue with my life. But it is part of my history.
It's history, correct? We learn from history.
Right.
Yeah.
The client you're talking about, I have no reason to, he's been really nice. He's been really cool. He seems very remorseful. Mm-hmm. And again, it's a judgment, and I could be wrong. It seems like he's trying to do all the right things now.
Right.
And I don't know what more you can ask from someone.
Absolutely.
Right. If it's real and it's sincere and all that stuff.
And there's no reason. I don't think there's any reason to treat him differently than anybody else. I think you can still have precautions about dealing with something or with somebody. I'm not saying him, exactly, but anybody, you could have precautions, right? I mean, I can essentially, just make up another person this other person that you've helped out before, whatever. All of a sudden they go to prison for stealing money, right? Or embezzling money from a company or something like that. Now, should you essentially, I'm not saying, right, they're like they changed or whatever, but should that essentially mean that you should trust them
with money?
with money? I mean, that's necessarily no.
They have
nothing
to
wrong with that.
Prove that, earn that back,
right?
And they're kind of at the mercy of whoever. I mean, there's no timetable for that.
Right.
If this person wants to work with you, it could take them 2 years with you.
Right.
and somebody else maybe 2 months. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that's kind of the price we pay for the mistakes we make. And
Right.
but right, there's a difference between saying, okay, I don't know if I want this person working around my money, but I'm not going to condemn them for what they've done in the past. I'm going to give them a second chance.
Right.
And yeah,
you still you won't treat them any differently. It's just you wouldn't just give them your checkbook though, essentially either.
right. And I think, again, we don't need any details, but 4 of us had a meeting a few weeks ago, and one of the people, and they corrected me, and I admitted it, like, we have to give people a chance to change or to grow up. And if this was something they did 2-3 years ago, that doesn't mean they're still doing it now.
Right.
Which she was correct about. So I don't know, to kind of wrap this up, like how do you feel like you balance all that?
Balancing judging somebody?
Well,
or judging or judgment or
yeah.
I think essentially, right, whatever my values are, my morals are, I try to live by what the Bible tells us to do, and that's how I essentially my compass for guiding me. So, like I said, if something's if a person is essentially outside of that compass or whatever, then you have to make a decision if you should, trust
right. it. But there is a difference between, okay, maybe I don't want to hire this person for my company, but I'm not condemning them as a person.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the latter, or the second part, is what we're called not to do.
Yeah.
Right. But we do have to make judgments every day.
Yeah.
In our life. And it's a different kind of judgment than.
Yeah, I think you got into it as well too. There's a lot of scripture. I mean, I was Googling some stuff. I mean, I've read some about it, but I mean, there's one passage or article you could read. There's like 85 scriptures on judgment.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, I think God tells us to judge righteously. He tells us not to. I think when he tells us to judge, I mean, essentially, it's judging. It's telling us an okay way to judge, as far as there's different ways to judge people and make judgments about things. But essentially, deep down in, we're not supposed to judge somebody just the way they essentially look or the money they have or whatever. It's about, I think, essentially calling about their moral, I'll just call it the moral compass, or their code of conduct, or their beliefs or whatever. That's how you should judge somebody, and essentially how they act or treat somebody or treat other people. And that's essentially what we should judge people on, not by what they have or don't have, or what they wear or what they don't wear, or some of the stuff like that. Unless it comes to, we get to this job thing, right? And I mean, I think this is, it gets so sticky with this. I know we have a decent amount of people that listen to this, but it's like I'm going to say, what I'm going to say is probably not going to be agreed with by like a lot of people or whatever. But I mean, right, if someone comes in for a job interview, man, for like right, let's say we put on an ad for personal trainers, okay, and someone comes in and they have like a freaking pentagram on, a pentagram necklace, they come in, they have cut off jean shorts and flip flops, and looks like they haven't they haven't shaved in 20 weeks, or everything like this. They're coming for a job interview. Like, man, there's a good chance I'm not hiring you. Like, I'm not. Then I'm just putting that out there. And I know a lot of people probably disagree with me. Like, oh, you can't judge anybody. You have to do the interview. And what about them on the inside and do all this other?
Well, them on the inside decided I don't need to clean myself
try to
up.
Look professional for
yes.
Yeah. So essentially, they made the decision to look like that or come into a job interview like that, and so that's kind of their choice. And essentially, what you're saying, like what I think we've come to an agreement on, I think, and what I think the Bible tells us, it's okay to essentially judge people just in a righteous way, or use judgment in a right ability, essentially not per se judging people, but making
I mean,
judgments.
you're not saying he can't be a member here. You're not saying he's a bad person. You're just saying, I don't think you're the right person for this job.
Correct. Yeah.
And he, like you said, he had the choice to present himself any way he wanted to.
But now this big problem with everybody and all this woke bull crap, this bloody woke stuff that
let's hear it.
That's going on. It's like, right, like someone like that comes in like, oh well, they didn't hire me because I'm white, or because I don't want to shave my beard, or because of this. And really, it's actually, hey, have you ever just this whole thing we're talking about, the whole pulling the plank out of your own eye and crap before you do this? Maybe all this stuff is your fault ultimately, that no one's hiring you or this or that. I mean, I think you have to take that into consideration, your weight or whatever. Right. Even if you're overweight and you come, I know we're using that example, and ultimately, right, probably a lot of people aren't judging you. Probably a lot of people think it's awesome you're here, and a lot of people probably want to help you. But essentially you're getting judged no matter where you go. And ultimately it was your choice that you became overweight. And if you don't acknowledge that, you can't deal with it, because then it's not in your realm. It'll
never get fixed.
Yeah.
But you're picking the one place where you can actually do something about it.
Right.
And you're not going there. Because maybe a couple people in their head go, oh, look at that person. She's fat. He's huge, whatever. Okay, I'm not going there. Over thoughts that don't even come out of the person's mouth. Right.
Take courage and believe in yourself. It shouldn't.
Like this is how far we've fallen down. How cowardly everything's become. I'm not going to go anywhere if I get judged. Like, all right, enjoy your life then.
Right.
Hiding from everything and everyone.
Yeah. And essentially too, if you are that scared or whatever, especially you're coming to a gym, I mean, just tell somebody, well, think about this. Okay. Unless you're going to like a corporate gym. All right. But this is, if you Google like family owned gyms, or if you Google gyms, right, and you go look for one that's not a corporate name, right? So essentially, like, okay, I'm not trying to throw gym, like Anytime Fitness, Planet Fitness, Lifetime Fitness, Gold's Gyms, like stuff like that. Those are corporate gyms, right? So, but think about this: if you pick one that has a name or something, like okay, Lashley Training Center. You click on the profile, family-owned gym since 1995. I'm not saying we're the only ones. There's tons of places like this. Those people or that family or whatever started a business because they were probably very good at doing some sort of service, right? So, training to nutrition to martial arts to whatever that business is. And they decided that they're going to make a living because they want to help other people do this, right? So go to that family-owned, the mom and pop shop, and tell them, which we have had a lot of people, right, that have come in and say, like, I am completely terrified about doing this, but they still came in and they signed up, and and we're not like, don't be a wimp, right, and suck it up. I mean, sometimes people need to hear that, but essentially you're like, hey, like, I get it, I respect that even more. Like, you're acknowledging that you're scared, you're taking the courage to do something about it. And like, hey, like, I'll hold your hand through this. Like, it's going to be okay. Right. I went through stuff where I have anxiety, dealt with it, whatever. I've been scared about it. Someone can help me through. Like I'm here for you. If you have working with somebody, you're here for them. Like, I'm going to help you. I'll show you around the gym. I'll show you how to use the equipment. Like, I'm going to make sure you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Once you start talking to other people, you're going to realize everything's just fine.
Yeah. And then usually people are, right.
And they start sharing their story about where they started at and tell you that, nobody's thinking the way you think they're thinking, and that you just got to keep coming in and blah, blah, blah. Like,
right.
That's kind of a whole other subject on a different day, but
I just want to tie that in there a little bit, because I think that's important.
There has to be a part in you that says, well, F it. They're going to judge me. I'm going anyways.
Well, right.
Because I want to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let them
or I need to do this essentially.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, probably some people like this. Like, you go to the doctor, right? I mean, are people going to judge me? Like, I guess since
judge that you're sick.
Yeah. Judge that you're sick. You're not going to go to the doctor. Right. That's insanity.
I mean, I think part of it is just an excuse not to go.
And I'm sure that's right, a lot of it,
Because like I said,
Right.
there's a lot of other places that go in public every day. And trust me, you're being judged for it. You
right.
know? But for some reason, this place, or a place like this, you hear I don't want to be judged. I'm just going to be judged there, so I'm not going to go. Good luck to you.
Right. You're going to be judged anywhere you go.
You made me think of something now. I can't remember.
I mean, this actually we should do next week is a podcast on ownership or taking ownership or something for your actions and anything, because I think that's essentially what this comes to next is trying to take ownership for your life, and
I believe
accept that stuff's your fault, and then you can deal with it.
I believe as adults, 95% of whatever's wrong with our life can only be blamed on us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Everybody has wild ideas of why this isn't working out, why that, the marriages and the money and the everything.
Yeah,
somebody else's fault. Or if this didn't happen to me 10 years ago, or if this person wasn't such a prick, like, it's you, dude.
Right.
It's you.
Yeah. Well, I've been using the gym for an example. I don't mind sharing this. Like, we essentially had a bunch of staff changes, and there's we have a process for doing stuff, or like signing new people up or training or whatever. We did like a recent ad or whatever, and we had a couple people coming in, and one of the trainers is working with these people or whatever, and essentially the people, they lost weight, really liked the trainer, and everything went really, really well, but there was like some confusion, the amounts getting paid, some of the process for check-ins, getting the nutrition to them on time, and stuff like this. And essentially, that's my fault, because I need to better the processes and reorganize certain things and make sure it's done correctly and the stuff is accounted for. But essentially, I have to, if I just said 100%, that's right. Let's just say you're the trainer working with these people, Matt, that's 100% your fault. You're messing this up, and this up. But I haven't took accountability for, hey, it's my fault. It's my business. I'm the one putting certain stuff in play. I made the pricing structures. I did like all this stuff. If I just tell you that over and over again, nothing's getting essentially fixed either. So I just think I'll use that as an example. So I have to take accountability for that. I have to adjust the processes and make sure the trainers or, you're getting trained on how to properly tell people how their memberships work and how, it makes you sign the waiver and, all this other stuff that's my fault, right? It's not your fault. I mean, but to some extent it will become your fault. If I adjust these things, I think that's something I have to take accountability. I have to fix it. I have to give you feedback on, this is why we don't do this, but hey, I apologize because here's how we should be doing it. And then we fix all that, and then it gets fixed.
Well, and if you've ever noticed, the people that like to have excuses and blame other people, they're generally not very happy people.
Right.
But when you can acknowledge and have ownership for your life, those people are usually happier.
Yeah.
Right. There's something, there's a freedom to it, which, next time we talk about stuff like this, we can get into that.
You have anything else you want to end on judgment?
I was going to say something about Rick and Morty, but
Rick and Morty?
Yeah.
Like the TV show?
Well, I was out one day and I saw somebody wearing Rick and Morty pajama pants, like in public.
Okay.
So I texted Lisa. I said, if everything was exactly the same about me, except I wore like Rick and Morty clothes, Beavis and Butthead sweatshirts, blah, 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 would we be married right now? And she said, absolutely. I said, that's BS. I said, maybe.
I'm actually, sorry, go ahead and finish this, but I want to touch on this really quick too after you're done.
I said, maybe if you had gotten to know me a little bit and then I broke out like my cartoon t-shirts and stuff like that, maybe. But if that was what I was wearing from day one, you never would have had interest in the first place because you couldn't take me seriously. And she goes, you're absolutely right. We would not be married right now.
And same thing with Kylie. I asked Kylie something similar to that as well. Well, she jokes, says that if I acted how I mean, not that I'm, but if I was as eccentric now as I am when we first got married. That
or if you would have showed her that side in the very beginning.
Right.
And why is that? Because they're making judgments.
Right, correct. But
right?
And I told her too, man, this is going to sound bad as well too, but I said, essentially, she asked me the same thing. Hey, if I looked like this or like I was ugly, would you still marry me? Absolutely not. I mean, it sounds bad to everybody,
but it's the truth.
Yeah, it's
right?
true. I said, yeah. The first thing, I think it's a natural instinct for humans or for people is, yeah, if I didn't think you were pretty, I would have never talked to you.
Well, yeah, there has to be some kind of attraction.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, should it be this way? I don't know, but kind of the way you present yourself, right?
Right.
Goes a long way too, whether it's for a job or whether it's looking for, a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, or wife,
Right.
Some people, not all people, if they see somebody dressed a certain way, it's just not going to happen.
Right.
Now, maybe if they end up getting to know each other some other way, who knows? But, so I said to her, so the way we present ourselves matters. And she said, yeah, absolutely. I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we finish that too, as well, like if you look at my hair, my beard, I need to cut it because people think I'm a hobo when they come in to try to buy a membership. Probably.
I think you're fine.
Okay. Well, if you believe it, you can achieve it. And we'll see you in the gym soon. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe and hit all the bells or whatever the buttons are on there. Thank you.